In this video, we will create an API endpoint that responds to HTTP post requests containing headers. You can create endpoints that respond to GET, PUT, and DELETE requests containing headers in the same way shown in this video. Select Post from the HTTP method list. Enter the path to this endpoint in the API path field. Let's assume that we are creating an API that inserts new items into the database. The caller of the API will be including new items in the body of the request, which means that we will have to define the body of the request. So let's select the checkbox. Next, we enter the content type. Let's enter application/JSON since the caller will be sending new items in JSON format. Pick exact from the match type list. Then we will enter the contents of the request body. Since our request has headers, we will move down to the HTTP request headers section to define the headers that this virtual API should be expecting with every request. Let's select exact from the match type list. And then we will add the first header key and header value. After that, we will press the Add Header button. Let's add our second header key value pair and then press the Add Header button. We will now define the response of this API endpoint. Enter 201 in the response code field. Enter application/JSON in the response content type field because this API will be sending the response in JSON format. Enter the JSON in the response body. We will also enter a few alternate responses for this API. Providing alternate responses is optional and can be skipped if not needed. Alternate responses are returned only when the simulation mode is enabled. When simulation mode is enabled, then this API endpoint will pick one of the alternate responses and send that to the calling application. There is no particular order in which the alternate responses are returned. Let's add a few alternate responses to this API endpoint. Just like the HTTP response above, alternate HTTP responses require an HTTP return code, content type, and body. Providing response content type and response body is optional, but response content type must be provided if response contains a body. Now that we have added the alternate responses, we will go ahead and publish this API endpoint. The API endpoint is now published and it is ready to use. Let's press the Test API Endpoint button to launch the built-in API testing functionality. All the fields are pre-populated, including the header and the header values. We will go ahead and press the Test API button to call the API server and wait for the response. We have received the response, and as you can see, the response is exactly the same as we described. Response code is 201, content type is application/JSON, and response body indicates that the item was successfully inserted. Let's run another test, but this time we will change the header values. Let's change the authorization header value to bearer token 2 and change the value of app ID to app25. Let's press the Test API button and wait for the API server response. We received the response, but the server returned 404 as the HTTP code. The reason why we received 404 instead of 201 is because we instructed the API server to expect a specific value for the authorization and app ID headers. And because we changed the value of the two headers, the API server cannot find a matching API that is capable of handling different values for the two custom headers. So how can we make our API capable of handling different header values? Let's go back to the API editor and make a small change. We're now in the editor. Let's move down to the HTTP request headers section and change the value of headers match type to any. Let's save the change we have just made and test the new change. We are in the testing mode. All the fields are pre-populated. We will go ahead and press the test API button and wait for the server response. We have received the response indicating success. Let's run another test, but first we will change the header values. We will change the authorization header value to bearer another token and change the value of app ID to app25. Press the test API button and wait for the response. Unlike last time, we received the return code of 201 and message body indicating that the item was inserted successfully. Let's run another test by changing the header values once again. Change the authorization header value to bearer third token and change the value of app ID to app11. Press the test API button. The API has returned a response indicating success. We defined alternate responses for this API. For the API to return alternate responses, we need to run this API in simulation mode. Let's head back to the editor and enable simulation mode. As you can see, simulation mode is currently off. We will enable simulation by pressing the simulation mode button. Simulation is now enabled. Let's do a few rounds of testing. We will be changing the header values before each test. You will notice the API will return different responses. That is because we have enabled the simulation mode. The API is picking a response from the list of alternate responses and sending it back to the calling application. In this video, we have demonstrated how virtual API endpoints can be created that are capable of handling headers, and how headers can be coupled with response simulation to return different responses that can be helpful during application development and testing cycles.